Good morning, Vietnam, and welcome back to the Sunday Morning Ride. It is April 27th of 2025. If it looks like I was sick all week and I was in a car accident, you're right, and I was. This is going to be on YouTube, also available on podcast. Sunday Morning Ride number 26 will be featuring Jason Bryant, one of the greatest voices in wrestling history. He, I believe, you guys can fact check me on this, but I believe is the first ever National Wrestling Hall of Famer on our show. I think. Don't quote me on that. Like I said, one of the greatest voices of wrestling. You probably heard him as the public address announcer at the D3 National Tournament, the D1 National Tournament, Olympics, Worlds. The list goes on, and Jason and I will get into some of that stuff. But he's also the master talk between Matt Talk Online, the mastermind behind Matt Talk Online, and he's worked for a lot of different high-level wrestling media companies and organizations like Intermat, USA Wrestling, done a little bit of everything, a true servant to the sport of wrestling, an elite historian, and much, much more coming here in my conversation with Jason Bryant. Also, Sunday Morning Ride number 26, brought to you by Ardent Mills in Lake City, Minnesota. These guys are the absolute best. If you're looking for a job, you know somebody looking for a job. They're always trying to grow your team. And here's the thing. If you're a wrestling coach, you know this much. You don't wait to grow your team until you have a need. You're always looking to grow your team. You don't wait until you need a 160 pounder and you walk out into the hallway and you find a 160 pounder. Always be looking to grow that team. So give them a quick Google search. Look up Arden Mills in Lake City. You will recognize a lot of these elite wrestling names. Last time I said it sends chills down my spine. I stand by that. I will not take it back. I stand by that. Majuris, Bayer, Clinworth, Murray, just great group of dudes. Great group of dudes. Look at Arden Mills in Lake City. That's all I've got. Let's get started.
Jason, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm just curious. When you talk about JV takes, there's no better guy than me because I never wrestled a varsity match. So I'm here. I am your avatar, man. I'm that kid that knew everything that never actually got into the match. So I'm here for it.
You were one of us. Was it junior high wrestling? Just junior varsity?
I never. I mean, I was on the team. I mean, like as I said, I came out for wrestling at the end of my junior year, and I was on the team for some of my senior year. Really, I didn't really last that long, to be quite honest with you, because we were a nationally ranked program. I wrestled all summer with the PWA, and then I tried to accelerate years of not wrestling by cramming as much summer practice as I could prior
Sure.
to my senior year. And then I bring a guy out to be like kind of my workout partner, and he ends up winning the spot at heavyweight. I got a regional champion ahead of me at 215. I probably could have made 89, but it was a sport I fell in love with quickly. I went out for the team, and it was not really wasn't the one that if you were to put me in a line and be like, you're going to do this sport at 16, 17 years old, I was a little behind the curve. So I make no delusions of grandeur about how good I could have been. Granted, if I'd have started earlier, you never know. That
Right.
summer I did beat a couple starters from some other high schools, but it was off season stuff. So we were a nationally ranked program. First year kid doesn't see mat time. It's like trying to walk into like Apple Valley's room in their heyday and be like, "Hi, I've never wrestled before. We're
Right.
good. Let's try
Right.
it." And you're the stat nerd guy that's announcing everything. Usually that doesn't go well for you, but it ended up working out pretty well for me. I've spent enough time on the mats, and after I graduated, I still rolled around a bit. Actually, even after I graduated college, I was actually helping more out with the wrestling club where I grew up, because two of the assistants at my alma mater had come on, and they were the coaches at the PWA. So that one summer, I graduated from school. I was living at home with my dad,
Hmm.
and I was actually in the room 2-3 times a week. So I got a lot more on the mat wrestling stuff. My shoes got broken in more after high school than they did while I was actually in high school.
Sure. So you're one of us. You're our mascot. We got to get you a JV Takes shirt. You're going to
See,
make
the
us
problem
proud.
with this is there's a mascot story here too, because the
Oh,
wrestling
God.
coach at my high school will always tell the stories like, when I found you, you were wearing a basketball on your head. This is very true. So that senior year, I was wearing a no, it was my junior year. I was wearing a maroon and gold spray painted cutout basketball on my head, trying to rouse up our student section because we had like 12
You,
seniors on the
you
basketball team.
chose to do this? This was your own
Hey, it
doing?
was me and the basketball coach. I was like, "Yeah, man, we really need somebody to drum up some support." And the coach looked, so somebody like you, because I was always talking about the lack of student support at our home sporting events and
Yeah.
such. And so for 2 games, I was a de facto mascot for our eventual 1-22 boys basketball team.
1 in
So Coach Billy
22.
Ruff will always point. He's like, when I found you, you were wearing a basketball on your head. His timeline is a little different, but he's pretty close to that. So yeah, I did spend time as briefly as a mascot in high school, trying to drum up some student support at
Please
a rather apathetic part of our fan base at that time.
tell me that the one win came when you were the mascot.
No, I do not think. Well, no. I'm trying to think. My freshman year, they won 1 game. And then my senior year, they won 1 game. So that coach, great guy, his name was Bob Baker. But in the 5 years he was the head coach, they had won 13 games. So the joke was Baker's dozen.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
Oh, that's frustrating. Yeah, been there. That was my high school baseball team. I can't imagine you wearing a basketball on your head. You're such a wrestling guy. That seems like kind of a
I was
sin,
pretty deadly
sin
from the
from your
top of the key,
past.
though. Unguarded top of the key, I could knock him down. I mean, I wasn't exactly a rec ball legend, but I played a lot of pickup basketball, and that was a sport growing up in Newport News before I moved to the wrestling crazed town I did. Everybody thought they were a basketball player. I mean, there were 4 different rec leagues at the elementary schools when you're up to 7th grade. And
Yep.
Jenkins was the A league, and I think it's over at Sanford. And we had some good teams. I mean, we had some guys that were in our league. Michael Vick was in the league.
What?
Some things like that.
Michael
Yeah.
Vick?
So I mean, yeah, he
That's
graduated with my brother.
that's a name drop I did not expect.
Do you grow up in 757? You're going to run into somebody. I even know his alternate name, Ron Mexico. So we grew up with those guys, and there's I remember covering Ronald Curry in high school, and in my newspaper escapades. So there's a lot of you can't really throw a rock and not hit a pro athlete somewhere in where I grew up in Virginia. So
Sure. But now you're one of us. We got you in Minnesota. You've been here 13 years now, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, moved out here in '08, and then 18 months, left for 3 years, and then came back in 2012. So been in my house almost 13 years. 13 coming on 14 total. So
What levels Minnesota wrestling do you find yourself kind of following along? Whether that's, casually just falling into it, or, stuff that you try and more actively follow in Minnesota. What do you get into right now?
it's always the college stuff. So I
Stuff.
pay attention. I announced the Division III and Division I championships.
Yep.
So I mean, and I've done the home duels at Augsburg the last couple of years. I've done the home duels at St. Cloud State the last 2 years. So time we record this, I'm going to St. Cloud State, our wrestling banquet tonight. So I've kind of latched onto that program, which actually came through hockey first, which is kind of interesting. But I like to pay attention to see where I'm at, where my friends are coaching. My school district I'm in the Mounds View school district. So we got Mounds View, but we're
Ooh, all right.
Irondale. So Mounds View's as we joke, is Mounds View's the sports school, and Irondale is like the band school, the smart school. They've got robotics and band, and they're good in that type of stuff. And whereas like Marty Morgan's kids and Jeff Swenson's kids went to Mounds View. So I like to pay attention to see where those kids that are coming through the neighborhood, like my neighbors play, one of my neighbors played at Irondale, one of my neighbors plays at Mounds View. So the sports, I pay attention to, well, where are the local kids coming from? And then when my relationship with some of the coaches that are with the Storm, Mac and those guys, and Pinnacle, which is probably 10 minutes from where I sit, just seeing those kids and them coming through and getting to know their parents at tournaments here and there. So I like to pay attention to kids where I'm from, originally in Virginia, and then where the kids I live. So, that kid, that's a Blaine kid. Oh, or that's a Mounds View kid, or that's something like that. Or that kid goes to Fridley, which is I'm right on the Fridley line. So
Sure.
I'd like to pay attention to those kids. But when we get to the state tournament, it's mainly I had a chance to go this year. I went to the team states the first day on Thursday, and then announced the regional at Augsburg, and came back and watched the finals. Nick Slack said, "Hey, we got a room in the suite. Here you go." So I came up there and was watching with a bunch of the Augsburg alums, and they were watching all like their friends' kids and things like
Sure.
that. Winston's kid was in the finals. Veneer was in the finals. Like you're
Yep.
seeing all sorts of kids that are out there that are now second and third generations of people you knew. So it's more relational. Like who I follow is like whose kid do I know that's wrestling now? So
Sure.
uh, Irondale, I really haven't had any kind of relationship with that high school program. Or I've gone to a couple duels at Mounds View. When they wrestle Irondale, for example, but haven't really. I don't really have a whole lot of Minnesota roots when it comes to building into this community yet. But I pay attention to Alan Josh show, your show. So between that, I'm kind of caught up, definitely down there with what's going on. I used to go to the Clash quite frequently, even when I didn't live here. Love the Christmas tournament, like paying attention to that. So I like team races. I like to see who's good. I like watching, following the state duels. Like, okay, who's going to win this section? Even though I still don't really know the sectional layouts very much, which apparently is a big thing with realignment that just
Oh,
happened.
it's huge. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I like I said, I'm more of a casual when it comes to the high school scene. But in college, that's really where I kind of dig my heels in, and I know who's coming to wrestle for the Gophers, and know where St. Cloud's picking up guys. They had a kid commit the other day from Iowa, and I'm like, I'm gonna love announcing that kid's name. His name is Rowdy Neighbor from
Oh,
Alphabet. So like
only
those
from
guys,
Iowa.
I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna like saying that guy's name. So. That's been a lot of the fun. So it's kind of a general overview of Minnesota wrestling. I always speak very highly of wrestling when I'm at hockey or when I'm at other sporting events. And while I'm a native Virginian, I've lived in this house right here in New Brighton longer than I've lived any place in my life. So while like I said, I live in Minnesota, but I'm from Virginia. But that's really getting harder and harder to kind of justify since I've been gone from Virginia for 20 years at this point.
Sure. Yeah, you're in a sweet spot in the cities to be following up and coming high school wrestlers, because a lot of those guys on the northeast side of the cities, whether that's Stillwater, or just guys wrestling at Pinnacle and the clubs you mentioned, those are the guys that you're going to be seeing at the D3 national tournament. A lot of those guys are, some D1 guys, Ryder Rogatskis of the world or whatever. So you're in a pretty sweet spot in the cities to follow wrestling.
Yeah, it's not bad. And I live like right off 694. So great. Stillwater's not exactly a hop, skip, and a jump, but it's, I can get there probably 25 minutes. So that's probably
Sure.
they're in the section
Yeah.
that the Mounds View's in. But, I mean, I'm sitting there. So where I'm at, let's see. Totino is like less than a mile. So when Chris Pendleton was coaching at Arizona State and did his home visit with Lance Bennick when he was a senior at Totino, Chris flew in, parked at my house, and we walked to the football game where Lance was playing quarterback. Columbia Heights is right there. Fridley's right there. Irondale's right here. Mounds View's right here. They're all like right here. There's a bunch of high schools. I think I got 5 or 6 within a 4 or 5 mile radius. So, when it comes to good high school sports, I mean, Totino's got a good football program, so they've scheduled well. So I've seen Eden Prairie come over here.
Yeah.
So I've tried to watch some high school football, even though I don't have. Again, I'm not aligned with any particular team. My kids aren't in high school yet, so. But it's from a sports perspective, it is a good spot for sure.
Oh yeah, great spot. And then the college wrestling you touched on, that's kind of your baby. I don't want to get your job description wrong here, Jace, but I would say,
I don't want to either, because that's funny, because it's the longest conversation I typically have to have. Well, what do you do?
Yeah. Wrestling media jack of all trades. Is that somewhat fair?
Probably. I've kind of gone from broadcaster and announcer, since I do a lot. I'm probably known more now for my PA announcing, since I've had 3 Olympics and multiple NCAA games and such. I think I've done PA, I think, for 29 national championships at this point. And I've covered upwards of 50 already in some capacity. So, I mean, I was a writer for a long time. I worked at a newspaper for 8 years, ran Intermat for 3 years. And, I left Intermat 20 years ago, which is like, tells you the staying power of, the media on the internet. Or actually 17 years ago. I started 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's been more of it's a media. I mean, I'm kind of more in the historian side now, because a lot of the wrestling historians, a couple of them that were friends have passed on. And I think the next youngest guy, I'm 45. So the next guy ahead of me is probably in his late 70s. So there's, somebody needs to fill that gap there. Right behind me. Yeah, right behind me is there's a bunch of amateur wrestling news, is the actual physical versions of them. Going back to 1956. So I've got a lot of history at my disposal, and part of that is trying to learn. So I take that history, that historian part, I bring that into the announcing part of it. And, basically, like we were talking before we started recording, I'm the, hey, when was the last time guy?
Yep.
I'm the phone a friend. Like Sparks always jokes. Shane Sparks be like, if I need a question, I'm going to call JB real quick, and I'll usually have it within a minute or two. So that's the kind of thing. Historian, broadcaster, announcer, journalist. Even though again I don't actively cover things as much as I used to. Podcast editor, producer, host. I mean, I've done 3,000 episodes of podcasts going back to 2008. So I don't know. How would you describe that? Jack of all trades seems to be about right, right?
Jack of all trades seems fair
Master of
enough.
nothing. Because
Doer of everything, master of nothing.
diving into MySQL databases, I'm just like, oh, why do I need to know this stuff? Because it interests me, but I know just enough about everything to be dangerous.
Sure. And thus the preview guide, right? Or preview guide's
Yeah.
a big part of that. Because now you're up to like, what, 250, 60, 70 pages?
What was the
preview
last
guide?
version of it? Let me open this up real quick. This is what we call bad radio. We're gonna do something that the people at home can't see.
Right. Well, if you can screen share, oh, well, I shouldn't even encourage that. I don't know if I enabled screen sharing or whatnot. This will eventually make its way onto YouTube. So if
Well,
if
I'm glad I buzzed my head today. Actually, no, I'm the vanity of myself. I am actually a little long on the sides. I got one of those free
yeah, you
birds.
were
Gone.
little shaggy, you got to shave that down.
Yeah, it's well, when my daughter will climb up and like before she says goodnight, we'll sit there and find that one spot that's was the stars like, hey, Dad, this is really shiny. Stop it. So yeah, so I've got
Put the
kind of embraced
basketball
the whole
mascot head
baldness
back
thing.
on.
I look like every retiring wrestling coach, bald with a beard these days.
Oh, sure. I'm well
Yeah.
on my way there with you. That's one of our bits on the show. Whenever we do our YouTube lives for JV Takes, there's always somebody in the comments that is talking about the reflection on my head.
Yeah, and you know what? I have a light here in the studio which I can dim. I used to dim it, and now it's like, you know what? I got the key light, I got the dimmer. I'm like, you know what? There it is. All right, preview guide to 2025. How big was this thing? I'm trying to open a file that can no longer be accessed. Great. Don't you love technology? That's
So,
on my iCloud drive. I know we're right where it is.
so when you started building this baby, how many years ago was it that you
It was
started?
2013. So I moved back to Minnesota to work with what was then Amateur Wrestling News and the Open Mat. The Open Mat
Yep.
was a website that was started by Ray Brinzer and Eric Betterman. Eric
Yep.
lived in Minnesota and Circle Pines region, wrestled at Minnesota, and then finished up at Augsburg. And he had launched the Open Mat and was working on a merger with Amateur Wrestling News. They approached me in late 2000, well, mid 2012, if I'd be interested in coming on board. And I thought as a columnist, because I was writing for Win Magazine at the
Yep.
time when I worked at
Yep.
USA Wrestling. And I said, yeah, oh, yeah, what, for a column? He said, no, to work. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because my oldest daughter had was born in July
Hmm.
and had some medical issues. So what happened with her is like I didn't know what my life was going to be like because she had some things that we didn't know about. We didn't know exactly what it was going to be. So we were kind of playing that by ear. And the initial thought was maybe go back to Minnesota, work remotely for USA Wrestling. And I think it was 281 pages, by the way. I think that was what our final was this year.
That's nuts.
So,
That's too
yeah.
many.
Yeah, the Fargo one's bigger than that too. So we started doing these digital editions for the Amateur Wrestling News subscribers because, people were getting the magazine. The magazine's still out there, but it was like, a week after, 2 weeks after. And it's like, well, we need to do something more timely. The website was immediately timely. And I had a background in desktop publishing and newspaper design. I worked at a paper for 8 years. So I knew InDesign, I knew Quark Express, I knew how to lay out a page. I knew I mean, my design skills are, I'd say B plus, A minus. I mean, there are better graphic designers out there, no question, but I felt like I could bring a real Sports Illustrated feel to the magazine.
Yep.
So we started doing some digitals, and I did one for the Midlands. And the first time I did this for the Midlands, I remember I was at Drew Periano's house watching. I think it was the fight where Anderson Silva snapped his leg.
Okay.
And we were watching, and I'm sitting there trying to put this thing out before the Midlands, and I'm announcing the Midlands, but I was like, I'm going through track wrestling, and I'm taking the seeds, and I'm reformatting in Excel and blowing them out and putting in tables, and it's like, okay, I got it. And we kind of gave it away for subscribers, and then Eric goes, hey, why don't we do something like that for the NCAAs? I'm like, all right. And the first iteration was maybe 40 pages. It had 6 spots per. It didn't have any of the extra stuff. I don't even know if it had hometowns. It just had the basic stuff. And I went through track. I remember copying the season record forms and taking out the formatting. throwing it into a text editor, then throwing it into Excel to get the tabs right, and then pay. I mean, it took forever, and then I had given that to ESPN for their mat side broadcasters, and they're like,
You just
"Wow, that's
handed
pretty
it to
good."
them.
Well, by the time the next tournament rolled around, Amateur Wrestling News and the Open Mat merger had kind of fallen apart,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kind of left out there. I'm like, well, this is where I kind of relaunched Mat Talk. And I asked Eric, I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about maybe doing a preview guide. Do you have it? You feel like there's any ownership in that?" Or he goes, "No, just go ahead and do it. That's your thing." So I went and launched it and started selling it. I think it was $10 when I started. And again, ESPN paid for printing about 10 of them up for their mat side people. And from there on out, they've always wanted a physical copy of it, which you're trying to print at FedEx office is just brutal. I think I spent $500 printing just 10 of them this year.
Yeah.
That's not cheap. It's not, that's why there'll never be a printed version of it. But I just started
I should
digging.
have got into the printing business, apparently. $500?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's just for 10 of them. But I sat there and I started sitting there thinking about it. And I always want to know more about these things. Like when was the last time?
Yeah.
And when like Shane or Tim Johnson or at the time Adam Amin, who is one of the top broadcasters in the country. Hey, when was the last time? Hey, is there a spot in your book for this? So, and usually if that or somebody on Twitter would be asked like, hey, and I was like, you know what? You've now just created more work for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff I love digging into, because then I find things out. I find rare stats and figures that have never been discovered before. So the preview guide has become a thing that I can never not do, because it's like a yearbook, because it has the entire year of Division I in there. I wish there was some continuity in our stats where, again, the non D1 matches would be in there for a complete overview of, wins and losses. Matches against teammates don't count, so they're not included because they're not official bouts anymore. So, there's some nuance with putting it together, but work with Tony Rotundo to get a good shot for each weight class. There's some cool picks that we throw in there, and then historical links to historical brackets. So it's really interactive. Where the late Jay Hammond had given me his database before he passed away, and that is where a lot of this historical info came from. Is I took all that and then I've just added to it. I've added to it. There was a question like, hey, what's the record in the blood round? I'm like, well, we got to start when we got to a bracket of a certain point, which is like, okay, we got to go to 6th place. We got to go to 8 placers. That's where like the round of 8 starts. And then true placement blood round of 12 starts in like 79, but the full wrestleback starts in 96. So there's caveats to every little stat, but
that is very in the weeds.
Semifinal record. So I dig through that, and I've got these these sheets, and I'm just like, I'm adding to it. So every year I want to add something new, so there's a value in buying it each year. So
sure,
it's a lot of it's for my knowledge too. Is I'll put this stuff together, and when me and Bryant Hazard are announcing the nationals, the stuff that I've gone through, it's quickly in my head. I was like, oh, I remember putting that together. We can quickly access it because we both have it up in the PDFs when we announce. So it's become a resource, not just for me, but fantasy drafts. I know my buddies are in this like 130 person league, and I'd like 130 of them to buy it, but the reality is they might buy one and pass a couple around. But ultimately, it's been a nice little it makes enough to make it be worth the while. I wish 18,000 people would buy it. If 18,000 people would buy this thing, that could be my full-time job, and I could spend more time digging up these stats. Like I'm in a discussion on the Intermat forum right now about home states.
Sure.
Because I put the graphics out this week, and it's like, well, is it the athlete? And I was like, the athlete decides. That's what I'm going with. Well, he wrestled in this. Like, I get the arguments. So
sure,
I could maybe spend more time diving into that stuff if I had a customer base of over 10,000 where it would be worth my while to do something like that. So, hey, I'd love that. I'd love that. I would have to
everybody
do
go buy it right now. Get in
my
advance.
CPA fired us because of just how many different 1099s and stuff like that I had. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. Back to what you said earlier, having to know a bunch of stuff that you don't really want to know about. Yeah, I know I can do my taxes now. Great.
You can do wow, look at that. Jack of all trades. I'm going to take the media.
I'm not doing your
label
taxes.
Off. Well,
my wife's easy. It's one form. Mine, not so much.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I can't even imagine. I'm scared, Jason. I think I might be on the same path that you're on. I'm up to like 6 forms now, 7 forms. Am I getting close? Am I scratching the surface?
It was funny because a guy I used to work with at the newspaper goes, Jay, you're going to be the first guy to make $1 million from 50,000 1099s. So yeah, gig economy, man. Gig economy.
Math isn't great on that one. So with the so you said D1 and D3 NCAA championships. D1 championships, I think everybody kind of knows the storylines this year. Obviously, Wyatt Hendrickson, Gable Stevenson's going to be the big one. I was down at, was it Tulsa? It was Tulsa
Mhm.
where Spencer Lee got pinned by Matt Ramos. And everyone is talking about this after the tournament, biggest upsets of all time, D1 wise. In your recent memory, I don't know, we'll say the last few decades, where do you think those stack up in the big upsets you've seen in D1 college wrestling?
That's a good question because I think Gable getting beat was a bigger upset in terms of the like I guess, I mean him and Wyatt hadn't been close.
Right.
I mean, there was not. I mean, you got a guy that he came back after 2 years off and was beating people worse than he was
Right.
when he left. So I mean, I thought Gable. I mean, I had Gable written in on my Hodge ballot right away. I mean, once I heard he's coming back, I'm like, oh, that's easy. And then he goes out there and he's mud holing good people.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it wasn't like when he was dominating the field and he won it with Davison and those guys, and when there was like 6 world champs in his bracket
Yeah.
one year. But Hendrickson, that one really surprised me. Now, but when it comes to volume
Yeah.
and impact, Spencer Lee in recent memory, because obviously I wasn't alive when Gable lost to Larry Owings, but
Right.
the loudness of the arena.
Side note, people should go watch that match on YouTube. Wrestling has changed so much since then. But
Yeah,
your point.
lot of riding time there.
Yeah.
But the volume of that crowd, and I think the added part that Spencer Lee was from Iowa, and they are still one of the most hated fan bases and teams in the country. They're like the New York Yankees. So, you can love Spencer Lee, but still love to see a Hawkeye lose. Those things, it's not like one or the other. So, it was one of those things where it happened. And part of it is there's that seed of doubt that was planted when he wrestled Ramos earlier in the year and got put on his back. And then you've seen him, pitching in, he's pinned him before. So it's like, there's always a puncher's chance.
Yeah.
But healthy Spencer Lee is like rip your arm off and beat you over the head with it. The guy is he's nasty and one of the best technical wrestlers I've seen in my life. So that one, in terms of, I felt Gable was, you write him on the line in the bracket and then you fill it out behind it.
You do.
I felt like you could mostly do that with Spencer Lee, but you're sitting there, you see Matt Ramos up there, you're like, you'd think back to that dual meet, and I think it was January. You're like, well, puncher's chance. I mean, pinner's pin. So, that's the one where I think the bigger upset in terms of, I mean, you also had a 3-timer getting beat in the semis, which, Gable wasn't a 3-timer. He wasn't going for that type of history where Spencer Lee was. It's never had a 4-timer. But also, oddly enough, 2 weeks before then, I'm announcing the NAIA championships, and you have Batterdine Boldma from Doane, who was riding a 100-match win streak, 3-time national champion, going for his 4th title, gets beat in the semifinals. So 2 weeks earlier, I had seen a 3-timer get beaten in the semi. Granted, we're talking different levels here. There's levels.
We
to
are.
this.
Yep.
But it was still the volume of like, that just happened. And then to see it happen again, I'm like, holy crap. And then have 18,000 people going, that just happened. And various expletives flying, like, holy crap. It was just, that was one of the bigger moments that I'd seen. And I think the only other crowd reaction that was that loud that I can recall during the tournament. Now, Ramos pinning Conaway at Carver a couple years ago, the Twitter duel, I want to say 2015-ish.
Okay.
That's the loudest I've ever heard in an arena. Tulsa was second loudest I'd ever heard in an arena. And then when Rob Rowan pinned Josh Lambrecht in 2002, which was my first NCAA championships, the match, leading into Kale, that place went nuts. And that wasn't sold out. It was like 13 and change in Albany. That place was loud. So those are the 3 loud points I remember in the sport of wrestling. Like, that was loud. I mean, you can even go back to Jim Gibbons telling stories about Iowa State and Oklahoma State back at the old arena going, yeah, it cracked the lights and the windows in the top of the arena. I wasn't alive for that, but I'm saying like Spencer Lee and the Rob Rowan and Tony Ramos are the 3 loudest I've ever heard in an arena. Now, they were going bonkers when Gable got beat. So, but I think it was definitely for a different reason because everybody always loved Wyatt Hendrickson when he was at Air Force anyway. So,
sure.
Again, Gable kind of went heel there for the final a little bit. And whereas he had been on his farewell tour a couple years ago, got a good send off and then I think people generally with Gable are they're sad. Unfortunately, they're kind of over him. It's like, okay, what are you gonna do, man? I think that's kind of where that frustration came with. It's, pick something. I think that's where the
Yeah,
fans get annoyed with. Although we have a short attention span as people, and
we do.
wrestling traditionalists tend not to like anything that doesn't go traditional. So,
Sure.
they don't they don't like NIL, which, that's another issue entirely. But, the opportunity to wrestle 6 and 7 years, that's also another issue that brings things up. Like, there's people that didn't like him coming back. I'm like, well, that to me was stupid, because how would you not want to see this guy wrestle again? He had a
Yep.
year taken from him anyway, so it's not like he's getting, this is like his sixth postseason. So I mean, he finally wrestled 4 nationals. Yeah, he lost one, like they did in 2020. So that was one thing. I think the Gable, the part of the people were kind of over Gable, and then the kind of people like that loved Wyatt. Again, you can cheer for Wyatt and not be cheering against Gable too. It's like it's not one or the other. So
Sure.
those are
Is
the
this
things I remember about the long answer to your question about the
yeah.
ups.
Is this a safe space for me to wrap myself out? Can I do that on it? I think I
It's your
can.
show.
So when Gable first announced that he was coming back, I'll admit I was one of the people that said, "Why are we doing this?" I was one of the people that was kind of over it, just because for me, I was like, what is left to gain for Gable? Like if he gets upset, he loses a big match, does it do something for his reputation? He's already won a gold medal. Why is he coming back? What does he have left to prove? But I think what I did look past is the spectacle that it is for wrestling, right? All of the eyes that it brings to the sport. When Gable's at your arena in a random regular season duel, that really changes the environment at Northwestern. And Gable losing, unfortunately for me as a Gopher fan, losing in the NCAA finals to Wyatt Hendrickson, it's like, that's obviously not great for Gable's legacy and his resume, but for the sport of wrestling, I had people who weren't wrestling people asking me like how big of an upset is this, or how shocking it is. So, ultimately I think it was just an incredible thing for the sport of the wrestling. A great year, great to have Gable back.
Yeah, and you can look at it from a couple different ways. Like, okay, you had, 47 was there, so you add that to it. Then you had
Yeah,
Carter leading things off, becoming a five-timer. So you had your bookending the tournament with two of the biggest things of the year, added with added media exposure that Donald Trump brought to the event too. So there were more eyes on the sport at this NCAA championships then, I think it goes back to 2013 was the last time the viewership was this good.
sure.
So you can say what you want about, the current commander in chief, but it brings a lot of eyes one way or the other.
Did
So
did
and you
did you
put
get to
all
meet
those things
him?
together, and it really made a really mostly boring set of finals more memorable than probably would have been. Because again, outside of 141, the action was pretty stale.
It
So
was, especially early on. Yeah,
I
it was
mean,
a
it, we
slow
we
start.
we had a big fat fart burger on our hands. I mean, it was just really like, I'm sitting, me and Brian are sitting there. It's like, hey, where are we gonna, we split the finals on who's gonna get the pops and which match. And I was like, this is just, it's kind of, thank goodness that Hardy and Mendez went after it and started, throwing haymakers. Like, all right,
Right.
near fall points, nice. We
Yeah,
didn't
for
have
the
another
casual
tiebreaker.
fans. Yeah, for the casual wrestling fans, I think they needed to have that. The people who were flipping through their television and ended up on ESPN weren't super familiar with wrestling. I think we needed that action. But like the wrestling purist in me, some of those tight matches early on that went to overtime, I think there was a lot of entertainment value in those, but for the majority of people watching, yeah, we needed more action.
I still hate the tiebreakers, but that's another topic entirely because
That
it's
is.
folk style criteria. I'm not the first one to coin that term, but that's exactly what it is. You say, "Oh, I don't like freestyle because of criteria." What do you think the tiebreakers in riding time is? It's, I remember the first time I think I remember hating that was when I think it was Pusillo beat Varner in the finals, and it was like 2 seconds of riding time. I think that's the match I remember that I'm like,
Year?
2 seconds. I want to say it was in St. Louis.
Okay.
Was that like '09? I want to say off the top of
Okay.
my head. I don't know. Now I'm gonna have to fact check myself.
Don't get down the rabbit hole. Don't even do it.
No, I'm not gonna do it. I just want to know Mike Pusillo. I think it definitely was Pusillo versus Jake Varner. What year was that? '08 finals.
Oh
So
wait, finals. Okay. Did
yeah,
you
because I remember I was I see '08. That would have been the year. Yeah, I think that was the year Ryan Williams from ODU was in the finals against Jaggers, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Did you get to meet 47, or should I say, did 47 get to meet you?
No, no, I did get to introduce the sitting president, which was pretty cool. I mean, that's one of those things like, that's the craziest thing about that is I had the script and I actually still have the script. It's behind me somewhere.
Hmm.
And it was 17, I think it was 17 words. And I had a White House staffer and a Secret Service agent right behind me the entire time. Like, and on the notes, I mean, we have the scripts, there's the PSAs, hey, fans, be sure to join us at Fan X, or, you know, the 2026 NCAA tournament's coming to Cleveland, those things. But as we get to that part of the thing, it's like, do not, big bold letters, do not alter this tag. It was like, that's what it is. They came over, they took a picture of it, they got my cell number. So you want to talk about the most stressful 17 words I've ever had to say in my life. That was it. It was introducing Donald Trump. So and what's interesting is I go back and I'll look at the video. I'll try to find video of it. You can't even hear me introducing him because the crowd just like blew up. And it was
Oh,
like,
sure.
the 45th and 47th president of the United States. I don't even have a good copy of it. So it's one of those things. Like I am staunchly apolitical. I hate politics. I hate talking politics. From my political affiliate, I've been a registered independent since I was 18. I've never identified with any particular party. It's a toxic world to discuss. But for the office itself, to be the voice that's in the background, introducing a sitting president, no matter who it
Right.
is pretty cool.
So the Secret Service agents, they're just standing there. Like, do they hold the power to the microphone or something? Were they like
No,
ready?
I'm not sure that's what they were holding, but yeah, once I said it, they're going, all right, thank you, and they probably know who I've been texting from there on out. So
Second time for him at the national tournament, right? He was in Tulsa too, I believe.
yeah, he was not the sitting president at the time there, but
Correct. Yeah. I remember sitting there and I was just like awestruck. I was like, what is Donald Trump doing here? Because I think that one was a little bit more secretive, wasn't it? A little bit more.
he announced that I think the day or two before, and I remember being in the meetings in the back with the NCAA. We're like, oh, he's coming. This
Yeah.
time we knew, like, I think the Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday before it was announced that he was coming. So there was preparations in place. And like that, the day before we left, they had to start doing sweeps of the arena and, giving yourself extra time to get into the Wells Fargo Center. So, prepared for that and, just making sure you're not leaving bags around and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, the only other time I've had any type of there's a couple things. So when we did a Beat the Streets event in New York City one year, I was trying to get to Times Square for sound check. And I think Obama was the president then, and he was going somewhere else in the city at the time. And it shut down everything traffic wise. I'm like, what's going on? I was like, president's going through. I was like, oh, I think he was visiting Ground Zero or something that day or something like that. And it was okay, there's that. And then one time I'm actually on the way to Minneapolis airport. And I think it was also during the Obama administration. Joe Biden had come into Minnesota and they had shut down the entire side of that highway. Because I think it was on 62.
Okay.
And so on 30, from 35 to 62, when you're cutting that way from 35W to 62 on that side of the cities, one side of the traffic, nothing. Like everything was stopped. And I'm like, what the heck? And I read, oh yeah, Joe Biden was in town. So those are the only other times where I've had like my life somewhat impacted by a president or vice president, coming in, crossing paths with where I'm going. But no, I've never met a sitting vice president. I've met a couple governors, but
Sure.
nothing as far as the president goes.
You've done a bunch of international stuff though, and worked the Olympics. You ever run into like the Pope or Prime Minister of so and so?
Pope's not a Pope. The late Pope was not a wrestling guy, from what I understand. I think he came from a country that wasn't known for its wrestling prowess.
He ran out of time. He would have. You give anyone enough time, they'll become a wrestling fan.
True. I have had to introduce the president of the IOC, so Thomas Bach. I've had to introduce him, and that's another uptight kind of thing. Anytime you introduce an IOC member at an international federation event. Thomas Bach actually gave me an Olympic pin this year. So I did meet him in Paris, which was kind of cool. He saw all my pins and he goes, oh, so I said, thank you for coming. As he walked in front of me and he stopped, he saw all my lanyards with all the pins, which is kind of pin collecting as a thing at the Olympics. And he reaches out and hands it to me. And I went to give him one of my mat talk when he goes, so that one's, you need one of those for that one. And I'm like, all right, way to big time me, but thank you. So I've got I've got one from it's like an Olympic. There's only very few of those that were in circulation. Although I did kind of want the Snoop Dogg pin more than anything else at the Paris Olympics this year. But yeah, I've done world championships. I've been to 30 countries. I've announced, let's see, I've done every world championship since 2015, not counting the non-Olympic ones. I didn't do Albania or Budapest those years, but the traditional world championships, done the last 3 Olympic games. I've done the last 4 European. Okay, last year I didn't do the European championships, but I did the European Olympic qualifier. So I just got back from Bratislava a week and a half ago. Came back with a wicked sinus infection too, because we were in an equestrian arena. So there was the horse dust.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. So they did a really good job at transforming this place, because they had really a very short time to do it. So props to the Slovak Wrestling Federation they had like a leadership change, and like with a month to go before the Europeans, the entire place was like, all the organizing committee gone. They had to basically start over. So they did a great job of getting that thing going. And one thing about UWW events is what you see at one event, they're going to be consistent. Worlds will have 4 mats. The Continentals will usually have 2 or 3, depending on how big of the Continental is. And, they've got the walkouts, they got the structure, they got the software. I mean, they've really done an amazing job since 2013, when we lost the sport in the Olympics. So I tell you what, when I go over and work a UWW event, there, logistics are going to be what they are. Sometimes my hotel's not where I think it should be, or whatever. You just roll with it.
Yeah.
Once you get to the arena, things are going to work. And if they don't work, you just roll with it. And they've got a crew with everything going on. International events really actually very, very smooth. Contrary to like things that we think that, the International Federation doesn't do this, they doesn't do that. It's seamless, really, because they've got it set, and it really is. They've been great to work with for me, and it provides me opportunity to work on my linguistics.
Sure.
And such, I have a database of 3,000 names with the international foreign pronunciation on them. I like being able to be I'm a kid from Redneck, Virginia, who gets to travel the world. I'm not a kid anymore, but like as I'm somebody who came from Pocosin, Virginia, known as a fishing village that was good in wrestling, and
yeah.
And now it's taken me to 30 something countries and counting. It's kind of surreal when I go, like, I'm in Bratislava. I spent the morning in Vienna waiting for my luggage. Like, that's not normal things that people get to do. So I'm very, very fortunate that I have that opportunity to do these type of things.
The most cultured man from Redneck, Virginia, perhaps?
Well, I also want to clarify, there's a lot of places that are a lot more redneck than my hometown, but I jokingly say
I think I probably grew up in one.
I'm from there, so I can say that, even though I'm a move-in, even though I moved in when I was 12. So my dad was a move-in. So like, you've got to be there like 3 generations to be considered a Bull Islander. So it's definitely a point of pride. Plus, you've got five same last names there too. So that's kind of the jokes about small wrestling crazy town. Yeah, they're good in football. They're good in baseball. It's a sports crazy town, and I go look at the Facebook community groups that we've all got them. As you get older, you'll kind of you're like, Neighborly New Brighton, that's a fun one. Well, I go back and look at the Pocosin ones. I'm like, yep, there's my classmates arguing now that people are with now they're 40-something-year-old parents arguing, and there's my friend's kid winning his 3rd state title. There's I remember that guy. All those types of things.
Do you guys have a drive a tractor to school day? We had
no,
that,
but I do know a place that did.
Best.
Up in Stanton, so up where I-64 meets 81.
Yeah,
Stanton is right off the highway, and there's this coach Terry Waters. His son Sean was at the Southeast Regionals one year. I remember him telling me, he's like, "Yeah, dude, I went to Riverheads, and that was tractor day." I'm like, "What is tractor day?" He's like, "Dude, everybody drives their tractor to school." I'm like, "What?" No, we did not quite have that, because we're not a farming area. We're more of a fishing town. So,
sure. But
there are plenty of jacked up F-150s. On 36-inch Super Swampers. I just remember all that type of getting the trucks jacked up back in the day.
Oh, that's the best. Yeah, I grew up with that too. Goodhue, Minnesota, 1,000 people, or just got over 1,000. So
very flat. I've driven through it multiple times on the way down to Wabasha.
Very flat, yes. And now I actually work in Plainview, Minnesota, which is also a very small town and very appropriately named. They got the name right in Plainview.
And that's just south of Rochester, right?
East of Rochester.
On the way to Wabasha, you drive through. Okay, yeah.
Yep. Section 1 territory down here. Now, the big talker in southeastern Minnesota wrestling now, it's all about Simley coming back down. So Al and Josh, I don't know if they're going to have to turn into a Section 1 wrestling podcast too?
There's only this world ain't big enough for two of them, are there? I think there's only supposed to be one podcast per section, right?
We've been talking about this Anchorman style brawl for a while, and it might have to happen. Might have to get my trident.
Killed a man with a trident. You might want to lay low for a while.
Might want to find some family to stay with or something. Yeah. So, all right, a couple more questions here for you, Jason. We were talking about international tournaments, Olympics and stuff. Best tournament to work. What's your favorite one you've ever done before?
Well, the Olympics are going to be at the top. So yeah. I usually quantify this with my 5 favorite wrestling tournaments annually, knowing that the Olympics they're obviously every quad. The most recent Olympics is probably the most fun, although each one has its own degree. The first one I went to, I worked at USA Wrestling in 2012. Not a great era of international wrestling. It was the start of the Jordan Burroughs era. Okay. So getting to see that, Clarissa won a medal, Coleman Scott won a medal, Burroughs wins it. And I'm a staffer, so I'm part of the Team USA, the team behind the team is how they kind of say it. And getting to see that was cool. London's one of my favorite cities in the world. My daughter's middle name is London. So it's one of those things that has a unique place in my heart. Now, getting to announce in Rio was a whole different set of circumstances that was just very, very strange. It wasn't the best work environment. There was some struggles in terms of logistics. But on the flip side, we've got Kyle Snyder winning. And you've got Helen Maroulis become the first woman to win an Olympic gold medal for the United States in wrestling. That was still is the single most memorable moment of my wrestling career is Helen on the podium. And I'm basically just trying to keep my shit together, pardon my language, about how you might have to beep that out in post. I don't know. Is that something on the radio or is
this is a JV podcast, not professional whatsoever.
Just keeping myself together because it was just the most emotional wreck. I never thought I would. I cry at the end of All Dogs Go to Heaven. Okay. My wife jokes about me tearing up during any movie that's like, is a part where there's like this family. I'm like, it's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah. But this was different seeing, knowing Helen's backstory and then it being the first and then just trying to get these words out. Like, ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem of the United States of America. That was another set of 15 words that was harder, just as hard to say as introducing the president. And then Snyder winning was amazing. Then Tokyo was so strange because nobody was there. I was in a hotel room by myself for 2 weeks. I was allowed to walk across the street. I was allowed to walk. I was door dashing my lunch. Like I would order a lunch during a break and have it there until I could have something to eat for dinner. I think it was like a Tony Roma's or something like that. I was just ordering Cobb salads from Tony Roma's, an American chain in Tokyo. And I was like, it was 30 miles north of the city. So I couldn't really see a whole lot.
Yeah.
And then Gable's finale, but it was like if a tree falls in the woods, like who was there to see it?
Right.
And then, Tamira winning gold was such a cool thing, knowing how sweet of a person she is. And then, it was just so sterile and strange. And then Paris was just a riot. That was just amazing. I mean, just the French ran the Worlds in 2017. Amazing. Paris is a great city, a little smoky for my liking since I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. But I worked with the same producer, Javi Sens, who was in Tokyo, was the same guy in Paris. So that helps when you have continuity among staff. The judo announcer I worked with was rough because he had done judo, then he had to do wrestling, and he had nothing left by the end. Man, he was super. So he was the only French announcer, and then I was, I was also straining because at the very end, I think Kennedy's medal ceremony, I think I kind of silver medal. I think I'd stretched a little bit, and even at the end of the day, Tom Branson's like, "Hey Jay, you good there? Notice you kind of a little scratch there at the end." I'm like, "Yeah, thanks for noticing, Coach. Appreciate that." No, but
he's allowed to make fun of you for kind of falling apart. That's
Tom
their MO.
And Jerry are so hilarious when because they're you see them in the world in the confines like a college arena, and they're like maniacs. They're running around, and it's really strange to catch them, and they're really complimentary of people, when there's something that they want. I mean, I remember one year Terry came up to me at the Midlands like, you are the freaking best at this, man, and I get fired up. I'm like,
you're like, damn right I am.
They get you fired up, and they don't throw plugs and compliments out there. So when that means they're noticing, which is, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If I'm like, great. Now, I don't know if I'm more scared out of Bryant sitting behind me or the Secret Service. So, but so once I've got the Olympic stuff out of there, the World Championships are amazing because when in eras that you have the crowds like Kazakhstan in 2019 was so good because you had a big Russian crowd, you had a big Iranian crowd, and you always hear about the Iranians like da, 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 Iran, Iran, Iran. They are going nuts. It's great. Oslo, they were going nuts, and it's not like they're all traveling. These are the Iranians that live in these
Yeah.
countries
Yeah.
that will go flock to watch the wrestling. So the worlds and seeing somebody hold their flag over their head in celebration. I mean, we have a good sense of national pride, but to see the world like in 2018 in Budapest, to see, there was 14,000 people. That place was jammed for Greco. And it was just like, I mean, it's just some places just get so nuts. So, and my goal is to call every champion the same way, whether it's the
Yeah.
Worlds, the Olympics, the
Because they
D1,
deserve
the
that.
NAIA. So I'm calling, the kid that wins the NAIA championships, his call's the same way I'm going to call, when Kyle Snyder won the Olympics or something like that. So I try to be as consistent and, because you want to hear world champion. And you want to hear, the fans will hear the background stuff that they have. So, doing the worlds is probably 1A. Doing D1s though is the biggest crowd you'll get. D3s is the most fun.
The
Fargo,
most
I don't
fun.
announce that one. That's one I go and I cover and I've broadcasted it. I've
Wrestling
done the
historian.
interviews. I've done recaps. I used to cover it for Team Virginia on
Hmm.
phone lines back when Matt Talk was like, it was me, the guillotine, and NC Matt sitting there updating on phone lines back in the day. I mean, I've go see the Bishis forever at that event. And those are in the Virginia Duels, which is a tournament that got me into wrestling back when I was in
Hmm.
high school. So those are my five favorites for various different reasons. But announcing the Worlds and announcing the NCAA Division One championships are, without a doubt, the biggest rushes you get because you get the jitters, you get the nerves. And I think the only thing that actually gives me more jitters is probably right before I kick off a home hockey game at St. Cloud State too. So,
Oh, sure.
because that's always going to be a big crowd, and that's the one time where you're on display is the starting lineups. So there's each sport brings a couple different things, but you get nervous. I get nervous pretty much before every one of them, and if you're not nervous, something's wrong, I think.
Yeah. Well, you've done thousands of events now. You've literally done Olympics, and you got to be getting the jitters still. If you're not getting the jitters, you're either dead or you're in the wrong place, probably.
Yeah, and I don't have like this. I'm not like Zen like where I get this pregame, sit. What I like to do typically, right before like an NCAA finals is I'll get to myself. I'll walk a lap around the arena,
Yeah.
which you couldn't do with the Donald. But you once we get a rehearsal done, I like this. I like to find a little room and just sit back, have some tea or some coffee, and just kind of clear my head. Or sometimes I'm sitting on a chair, right on the arena floor, just nobody bothering me. The Worlds, I really don't have that opportunity because it's such a tight thing. But sometimes I'll do some breathing. I'll try to do that whole like Kevin Costner, clear the mechanism kind of
Yep.
thing, but
Clear the mechanism.
clear the mechanism. So it varies based on the event and stuff. But yeah, I do get nervous. Like when I go to a hockey game at St. Cloud, my pregame is an hour and a half early. I'll walk a lap at the Herb, get my starting lineups or get my line charts,
Hmm.
sit back, go into the training room, talk to or the equipment room, talk to the equipment managers for a little bit, and then probably drop a joke or two with some of the broadcasters, and then sometimes I might go up top and look over top of the arena or something like that. And same way with wrestling, if I can have 5 minutes to get collect my thoughts before we start, sometimes you get that, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. And sometimes you feel like you need it, or at least in my experience, I feel like I do. One of my buddies, Teague Fenwick, he does the Wisconsin Wrestler podcast. He's kind of like part of the Alan Josh, the Wisconsin complement of that. And we were doing the bi-state finals last year. And like his routine during the national anthem, how wrestlers like they'll maybe not pace, but they'll bounce a little bit and get side to side. And he's got some of that going. And I'm just kind of standing there, just like observing him from behind. And I'm like, what is gonna happen when the national anthem's done? Like, is he gonna blast double me? Is he gonna get into a stance? But I think everybody's got their own routine. It's a performance, just like a wrestler. You got to get yourself ready mentally, however that is. You got to get dialed in and ready to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. So, Jason, where can people find your work? I think most people probably know, but you're Matt Talk Online. You've got the Jason Bryant preview guide. Follow you on Twitter, all that good stuff.
Yeah, matttalkonline.com is where you'll find links to the podcasts, the links to the Fargo Almanac, which is what I update every year, which is it's not like a preview guide, but it's like a list of every All-American ever from the cadet and junior nationals, or now 17U or U17. Yeah, what is it? 17U? U17,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever that number is, and junior nationals going back to 1971. That's another thing that, like, the Minnesota and Illinois are both like, hey, what if you do this? I'm like, crap. So I always try to add some more stuff to that. That's available. Again, Matt Talk Online. I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Jason M. Bryant. That's what I am on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
At Matt Talk Online. Also, I've got a daily wrestling newsletter, which is mostly daily because we're in the off season now. But that's matttalkonline.substack.com, or you can sign up for it at matttalkonline.com/news. That is also has a premium kicker to it. So I'll put some stuff out that those stats dives. I'm going to find this out. I'm going to put that out there. It's also got ad-free podcasts, so you don't have to hear those pre-rolls from, I don't know, BetterHelp or whatever, McDonald's ad you hear during all the podcasts, mid-rolls and stuff, ad-free stuff there. I'm on Blue Sky, but that's probably where my college hockey interests lie. So I don't post any wrestling over there. So that's also at Jason and Bryant. But if you like the hockey stuff, that's where I kind of talk hockey over there. I'll do a little bit of the Wild one last night, so I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of the Twitter, but mostly, I mostly live on X. Even though I don't really like any social platform. I'm getting to be old and boring.
I'm with you.
So
Yep.
if that's where to find me. Matt Talk's got a Facebook presence. It's a lot of those news stories, but I'm really probably X and Instagram are probably the easiest ways to find me. MattTalkOnline.com, and that's where the shows are. Even though short time's not as prevalent as it once was, because I'm doing the back end work on all these other shows and such. So, yeah, that's where the stats are. That's
everywhere. Yep, you're everywhere. Jason Bryant, ladies and gentlemen, one of the great voices of wrestling. Thank you for joining the show. Appreciate your time.
Minnesota.